Hello, everyone. Just a very quick note from me to say apologies. I've been away for a little while and I wish I had an exciting reason for you. As all the financial advisors listening will know, tax year end is a very busy period, and I found my focus very much just being internally on all things clients and tax year end. And then the tax year end flowed very seamlessly into the Easter holidays, and I promised myself some time off. So I had a good slug of time off over the Easter, and I've been a little bit remiss in editing and getting podcasts out. But this one with Oliver Brown is ready, and I'm very pleased to be back on the podcasting. So there'll be a few more to come. We've got a load of summer events that are about to be published. So thanks so much. All those that have been following, liking, subscribing, it's very much appreciated. It really helps us out. So please, if you haven't done that, do give it a shot. And hope you enjoy the podcast. Hello and welcome back to the Private Client Podcast. My name is Chami. I'm a financial advisor and director at Glams IFA and co-founder of the Private Client Network. We're a networking group for private client professionals trying to close the gap between our various professions in order to improve the service to our clients and grow our respective businesses. Today, I'm delighted to be speaking to Oliver Brown, Head of AIM and Inheritance Tax Services at RC Brown Investment Management and the lead fund manager on the RC Brown UK Primary Opportunities Fund. Ollie, thank you so much for joining us.
Nice to be with you, Charlie. Thanks for having me.
I don't know why I say us. It is me. But the royal us with sort of everyone at Private Client Network. So no, thanks for joining. I'm going to start off with, you trained as an accountant. Why are you not accounting?
Good question, Charlie. Probably because I didn't love it. But I did a degree in money banking and finance at Birmingham University many years ago, and the truth is, if I had been offered a job at an investment bank on their graduate scheme back in sort of 2002, 2003, I'd be surprised if I hadn't taken it. But I didn't get such an opportunity. Maybe there's two reasons, I guess. There were a few less jobs around at that time because of the dot-com crash, but also very, very competitive area. I actually found it easier to get an internship, ironically, the year or two before than I did to get a job at say an investment bank. So myself and a number of my friends on my course, of course about 35 of us, we went down the accountancy route. We did the chartered accountants, did the ACA, because we felt that it was a really good quality qualification, rather than perhaps going and doing a master's, which we were thinking about. We just felt we needed something else rather than just a Bachelor of Science.
I think that was a good shout. I think accounting qualification probably does trump a master's in terms of like practical, implementable job prospects.
Yes, I would put it. Yeah, I think I'm biased, but it's a bit more like doing usually in terms of doing an MBA a bit later in life, maybe in your late 20s or early 30s. But I'd like to think it's sort of closer to an MBA, say, than certainly doing a master's. So that's what I started. I started in audit with Grant Thornton. You may ask me why I chose Grant Thornton. Well, I looked at the largest accountants. So I started with PricewaterhouseCoopers, or PwC as they are now. They didn't offer me a job. I was having a second round interview with Arthur Andersen, who were number 4 at the time, and then they went bust. So that kind of, ironically, I never actually got a rejection letter from Arthur Andersen.
You didn't make it.
But they disappeared. So I think that was never likely. And then number 5 was Grant Thornton. So they were kind enough to offer me a job, and in their audit department, which is where a lot of training comes to the audit or tax, and that's where I started.
Well, I mean, I kind of asked the question slightly jokingly, but most investors or an awful lot of fund managers have all got accountancy backgrounds, and presumably that put you in very good stead for what you're doing now in terms of investing in investing in listed securities and understanding the workings of a company. And there is only really one way to do that, and that's to understand accounts.
Yeah, I mean, it's absolutely vital. You're right to be able to read a balance sheet and a profit and loss and a cash flow. That's important. And actually, even though I'm the first to admit audit was not my passion, was never going to be. I knew from early days I wasn't going to stay in it for long. What it did give you was really good discipline, really good training, and actually every 2 or 3 weeks you're a different client and different sector often, trying to get your head around how their systems work. It was a real baptism of fire, I won't deny. For the first year or 18 months, I was like, I found it very, very difficult, because each company has got different ways of doing things. There's no standardized way. But actually, what other profession, age 21, 22, 23, are you actually speaking to the finance director
Well,
of
not many.
owner-managed businesses, or in some cases PLCs? So I kind of look back with your sort of rose-tinted spectacles and go, it really was a good thing to do. Even at the time, I kind of found it not that exciting, and couldn't probably wait to move on in some ways. But it was great training, and I made a lot of friends through it, and people who are now doing some really interesting things as well. So yeah,
perfect grounding, perfect
yeah,
for what you're doing now.
And I think now, when yes, my job is to invest in companies. So when you're speaking to the chief executive or the finance director, if you don't understand something, you'll ask, because that's what I spent the first 3 years of my career doing, of asking, going, I don't quite understand this, can you explain it to me? And now, if you don't understand something and they've explained it to you and you still don't really understand it, it could be seen as a bit of a warning flag to you. Well, I don't quite understand why they're accounting this way, or I don't quite understand their business model. That actually can be a good reason to go, do you know what? I'll just pass on this investment. There's no need for me to invest our clients' money in that, because there may be something, there may not be, but there may be something just a bit unusual about it that may come out in the wash later negatively.
Does that happen where you sort of pose a question to a finance director or CEO, and their answer comes back maybe more vague than you'd like?
They will have been. They should have been pretty well drilled, because if you're going to be the finance director of a listed company, the investment bank that, let's say, floated that business, should be given pretty good guidance in making sure that their numbers are watertight and they are, what you call sort of nailed down. And frankly, it's not just me as a fund manager, investment manager, that'll be talking to them. There'll be lots of other analysts and frankly people who are real industry sectors who frankly would know more than I do. So generally they're pretty good. But what I have seen finance directors who've been with the company a long time, it then floats, and you just find they're a little bit out of their depth. It may be in terms of communication, it may be in terms of guiding the market, it may be that they're just not as competent with the finer details of some things. So I probably can find some examples, but generally finance directors actually are the finance directors are the ones who should be trying to keep the chief executive on a leash a bit, because you tend to find chief executives, that they're all about a bigger picture and they get very excited about business, and that's great, and they're looking for new opportunities. But you need the finance directors to go, hey, what is it that we're going to forecast the market? Because really what we need to do is hit those forecasts. Otherwise we start getting a bad reputation and our share price will get hit pretty hard.
Yeah. Sorry, the sound's gone a little bit on that. Don't worry, we'll carry on. Okay, so you graduate money banking and finance, do the ACA, get into a very large accountancy practice and scrutinizing balance sheets and stuff in audit, and then you make the jump into I guess the field much more relevant to what we're ultimately going to be talking about today, which is investment management with a tilt towards individual investors. What was that like, going from sort of a very large corporate to a smaller firm dealing with individuals rather than corporates?
Yeah, very different. And I think we've chatted about this, haven't we? That we went from big companies, you obviously at Morgan Stanley, to, I think I was employee number 6 or 7, where I am now at RC Brown. So yeah, it was a real culture shock. Didn't have any peers, whereas there was probably 50 trainees in our office.
Yeah.
So it was very different. It was very different. Obviously, I moved from London to Bristol. Didn't know many people at all. So yeah, it was very different. But ultimately, it was doing a job that I guess I'd always kind of wanted to do. I've been buying and selling shares since I was 16. I'd had interest in stock markets probably even for longer than that, or for longer than that. So yeah, it was very different is the answer. But big companies and small companies alike, you have to adapt.
Yeah, I mean, you think you had it similar to me. It was very much a sort of topic of conversation growing up, which kind of, I suppose, if people don't have parents working in the field, it sort of maybe probably sounds a little bit weird that you talk about investing at home. But yeah, I very much remember it. And I remember being asked about it in my university entrance interview. I've got no idea why this sticks out in my head, but I remember being able to pose a reasonable answer at the tender age of 18. So something must have stuck.
But
Must
it did you well, and I mean, yeah, you're right. I mean, I don't know if we sat around a dinner table quite talking about social shares, because I do have a sister who's a French teacher, by the way, so there was some diversity in the family. Um, but I mean, this does sound weird, but for Christmas or for birthday, we'd be given like a few shares in a company, and so
helps,
I'd get
doesn't it?
a few. It'd be like, it might be like £10 or £15 worth, maybe not even that. But I remember the names of some of those companies. I always remember my sister's shares would do better than mine. And then when I was 16, again, you might think, well, this is strange. I got given some shares in Sunderland Football Club for Christmas, probably £150 worth, £200 worth. And that's when I used that money. I made some money on those. The combination of football and investing kind of was a good way to really get me interested. And I used that money to. I eventually bought some shares in Birmingham City, which didn't do so well. But the chief executive was later done for convicted of money laundering. But anyway, at least someone came in and bought the
Details.
shares. So yeah, details. But yeah, so that's kind of, you're right. There had always been this interest there, that I guess a bit of a in the blood, some might say, which it obviously is very fortunate, really, if that's something you're interested in, which clearly I was.
For those who maybe aren't, because sort of a lot of listeners will be financial advisor or maybe in investment management, but for the non-financy people who might be listening, explain what sort of high level, what is a fund manager? What is it you do, and who uses that sort of product slash service?
Yeah, so a fund manager I am a fund manager of a UK equity fund. It's a small UK equity fund, and that has pulled lots of individuals' money together and put it in one fund, effectively one. Think of it as an account. It's like a bank account. It's got one bank account, and then it's got an account where all the shares sit. And the advantage of these funds, if you like, is that anyone can buy a share in it. And the share price currently of our fund is around about £5.90. So as long as, and you can actually you don't have to buy one whole share, you could buy part of a share, but it does mean that even if you only got £25, you can buy £25 worth of this fund, or any other fund for that matter. And so it's my job. So there'll be hundreds and hundreds or thousands of clients whose money, some have got £100 in there, some might have 100 or 200 or £500,000 in there. And that's all pulled together. And so effectively, I, as a fund manager, just see it as one client. But then obviously the administration will then report to each of those individual clients on a 6-monthly basis what their holding is, and obviously how their funds have fared. So it's a very efficient way of somebody getting some exposure to the equity market, and without having to have loads and loads of money. In the old days, you'd have needed, RC Brown, certainly when I started in 2000, at the end of 2006, to have a client, to become a direct client of ours, you needed £2 million. So
Wow.
that precluded most of the market. So the way around that was to, if you had £100 or £10,000, you could invest in our fund. Now the world has changed a bit since then with technology, and our own business has changed. In 2010, we actually set up a private client operation, which meant we invested in systems, which meant that we could run money for clients who had more modest amounts. We effectively now do it from £15,000. So yeah, that hopefully answers your question about funds before we go off
So
tangent.
yeah, it does. So basically, instead of someone having to try and figure out what shares or other investments to buy on an individual basis, they can put money in a fund, which is, I think, to use the parlance, it's a pooled investment. It pools lots of money together. So what happens? The money arrives from tens or hundreds or thousands of investors. You then have access to this lump of money, and what are you doing with it at that point, and how do you do it?
Yeah, so I will invest that. I mean, the fund that I run is a UK equity fund, so the remit is to invest in the UK. I'm not
Yeah.
there to buy Apple and Nvidia, unfortunately. But so my job is to invest in UK funds, and just the way that we run our money, we would look to have 60 to 80 different companies in that fund across different market capitalizations, so from large cap FTSE 100 to the mid cap FTSE 250, and also some smaller companies. We like to have a good balance because we do think there is growth opportunities among smaller companies that you perhaps don't get the big ones, but obviously big companies tend to be a bit more stable, possibly pay better dividends as well. So we're really trying to have a balance, and without getting sort of too into how exactly we do things, what we are unique for is the way we invest our money, and we typically buy into new companies, new holdings, when they are at the time that they're raising some money. So one of the reasons a company floats on the stock market is because it wants to expand, and therefore it wants to sell new shares and raise new money. And we will look at those companies that are doing that are raising money, and then we may invest in those. And the various reasons we do that, but we do find that a good way of investing in companies that are frankly going places.
Yes, God, it is a fascinating job, and I do not want to be negative about friends or colleagues that we may have in audit, but I have to say, I think investment management and what you're doing is by far the more interesting job, and ultimately, like, really nice outcome. I mean, like a lot of us, your aim is to make people better off, to build wealth, and hopefully, by virtue of building wealth, allow people to sort of live slightly better lives and do the things they want to do, which I always think is quite, without getting all misty eyed about working in what we do, it's a pretty nice thing to get up and try and do on a Monday morning.
Yeah, I think you're right. And I think a lot of people think you need to have lots of money to have to have an investment manager. And the reality is you probably don't. You certainly don't with us. You need £15,000, or we've got a couple of funds where you could put, say, £50 a month in and just start building things up. But it's true, we do have clients who got plenty of money and plenty of investments, and you could argue whether I do a good or a poor job for them won't actually make any difference to their lives. But some of them have charitable trusts, which that money is then used for, obviously various purposes, but typically will be going to be used to help those more in need than ourselves. And then sometimes you might be running a pension fund or a small local pension fund where you don't actually see the end client or the end clients, because there may be people who are modestly paid, who are putting in a bit of money each month that is then backed also by their or matched by their employer. And actually, the difference between them having a pretty difficult retirement or perhaps having an okay or just about okay retirement actually is us. So if you're right, if that doesn't give you some motivation, then you probably are in the wrong job. And certainly, I wasn't a very good auditor, by the way. So I think they're quite two different. An auditor in a very don't look at risk. We look at risk, but obviously I've got to see through that risk and believe there's upside, whereas audit is very, very, very much looking downside, downside, downside. So they
Yeah.
apply in different ways. But yeah, I like to think I'm a better fund manager, investment manager, and auditor, but you have to ask, yeah, you have to ask the next colleagues, I suppose.
Yeah. I'm I'm really keen because it's, I mean, the other bit about what you do, which is sort of inheritance tax services, and I'm dying to ask you about it because I feel like it's become even more relevant post the recent budget. But just before we get onto that, just a little bit about, so your fund, you sit in a UK all company sector, which means you are your focus is very much UK and UK listed shares. How is the UK stock market doing generally? Is it in good health? I sort of, you read a lot about how many companies are choosing to list in the UK, and just for those listening, when a company wants to raise money on a stock market, which is why they list, they have some choice about where they do that. Um, any sort of views on UK PLC from that point of view?
Yeah, I mean, there's no doubt the headlines have been pretty horrific in many ways. I don't think it's quite as bad as some of the headlines, but there's no doubt that we are seeing a drought of new companies coming to list in London. And really, this is not just a phenomenon in the UK, it's across the world, probably excluding the US. So it has been a difficult environment for the UK. UK stock market has not performed particularly well, especially compared to the US over the last, well, in fact, last decade, frankly. And that's very much out of kilter with the longer term, where the UK and Europe have performed perfectly well. So there is a big onus at the moment on the new government to try and reverse the decline of London. London is very, very important to the UK. The London stock market is very important to the UK. I think it's the big financial services is the biggest sector, and just in that city square mile, the percentage of money that is raised through jobs and through taxes and stamp duties is really huge. I think the financial services industry in this country is worth 11% of our entire taxes that are raised.
Yeah, it's
So
big.
it is very important. So I'm always, it really annoys me when when we sort of beat up and put down our what is to me our finest export in many ways. We should be looking to grow it. Yes, it's important that it pays its fair share and it pays its way, but it does that because generally people in financial services are paid reasonably well, and therefore just by their income tax takings will help fund the government coffers. But at the moment, there is a big focus on trying to encourage companies to list in London rather than perhaps we have seen a number that have gone to the US, which may in other times come to London. And I think there is another problem is companies are now looking at Amsterdam, Frankfurt, and Paris a bit more. And I have to say, I have to put that down to the vote in 2016 to leave the EU. That if you were a pan-European business, sort of before that, the natural place would be to list in London. Whereas now it's kind of opened that can of worms where going, well, if say it's a pan-European business that's got say 15% or 20% of its sales in the UK, but 70 or 60% of its sales in Europe, the pressure could well be to perhaps float for political reasons almost to float in the EU rather than out of it. So that wasn't particularly helpful, and it's not
I
just
agree.
it's not just I wouldn't want to give the idea it's just Brexit because we shouldn't overstate something, but to me that was sort of the start of this drip effect of decline. There have been the good news is there have been some rule changes recently to help encourage individuals, entrepreneurs to list their businesses in London. So you now only have to float a single percentage of your business, 10%. There's also some rules which allow them to have greater voting rights as well for certainly the first 5 years, mirroring some of the things that go on in the US. And actually, if you look at the UK companies that have gone and floated in the US, they've done very poorly. One hasn't. The big
Interesting.
exception. The big exception is Arm, which is a real shame because Arm was once listed in the UK, got bought by a private equity firm, SoftBank, and then recently, a couple of years ago, got floated in the US, which was a real shame because that would be one of the mega caps in the UK if it was one of the biggest companies. But they decided it's a tech company, and the US is the natural home of tech, certainly at the moment. But I think the really important thing for London is not to overly worry themselves about getting too worried about the technology firms. If they're going to float in the US, they're going to float in the US. It's actually other companies. You want firstly the UK companies. We've got a lot of digital banks in this country, the likes of Monzo, the likes of Starling. There's a reasonable chance in the next 2 or 3 years that they're going to look to float, and we want them to float in London. They're British companies, and they will be looking at potentially float. They'll certainly be looking at floating in London, but the fear is that they may also look at the US. Having said that, them going to the US, they're going to be tiny companies in the US, whereas actually they're probably FTSE 100 companies in the UK. So everyone gets a little bit too wound up, gets a little bit too, the US is the only place to float. It's not as simple as you go to the US, you get a high valuation. Investors aren't stupid. They have the ability to also invest in the UK and Europe if things are cheaper, and that I think is what you're starting to see at the moment. Before we go off on a tangent.
Yeah, we could talk about this for a long time, but I'm quite keen. I'm quite keen to talk about the more recent thing that's happening in the UK, which obviously we had this big Labour budget before Christmas, a lot of changes, something very relevant to our industry. Well, to be honest, everyone in the private client space there was this big change to the rules around inheritance tax in a number of ways, but specifically around how pensions are treated. They're still consulting on some of those changes, but just for anyone not aware, pensions were typically considered outside of someone's estate for inheritance tax, and they currently still are considered outside of someone's estate for inheritance tax normally. But as of April 2027, they are looking to bring pensions back into someone's estate. So whereby they might have avoided inheritance tax previously, from April 2027 onwards, they will be counted. And this is a massive change because up until, or certainly since 2015, pensions in some ways have been one of the best ways to mitigate inheritance tax in a relatively straightforward way. Once that falls away, people are going to be still looking to do it and looking at what else is available to potentially reduce those inheritance tax bills. And that is something that you guys, an area that you also operate in. So give us a little overview on the AIM market, the rules and its rules around IHT and what you made of the budget, if you can condense all of that into an answer.
No, that's okay. I'll start with the AIM, our AIM inheritance tax service. So the AIM in the alternative investment markets, the junior market, and the rules as they stand currently are: if you invest in, it doesn't apply to every single AIM company, but most AIM companies, those that are classified as trading businesses, which are the vast majority of them. So if you buy shares in an AIM company, hold them for 2 years, at least 2 years, then you will get what's called 100% business tax relief on that investment. So effectively, you don't pay an inheritance tax as long as you hold it for at least 2 years. Now, the budget that, as you said, in October, they changed those rules so that now you only get 50% business tax relief on that, which means you will be paying an inheritance tax of 20% on those assets. So it's
still more generous than some things.
Yeah, it's more generous than obviously 40%. Certainly a couple who've got a home and also got children, over £1 million. But there's still an incentive to invest in it, and certainly for people with ISAs, big ISAs, it's useful because you can't put in your ISA, you have to put listed companies, and that includes AIM. You can't put some of the other unlisted schemes that are out there that you will know well, the likes of Octopus offer. But it's definitely, I wasn't particularly thrilled with the changes, as you can imagine, because it does make this product or this service there's still a tax advantage, but the tax advantage has been halved. And it does mean that you've got an AIM market. We're talking about the challenges of the UK market. The AIM market, in my view, is quite unique. It's very unique to Europe. There's nothing else like it. A junior market where a company that's quite young can list, can raise money, and can actually raise quite a lot of money if it's a good company. And you've seen some real success stories over the years. You've seen some really poor ones as well, but you think of like IFSL and E23, they've all been on AIM. So my own view is you want to be encouraging investing in, because it is high risk, and so you do want some compensation for that. But the rules have changed, and to be honest, that's the government decision, and that's just something we have to, we have to put up with now. It's governments will make decisions. Sometimes they'll be in favour for what you're doing. Sometimes they're against. I'm not one to sort of moan too much, because I just think that's the hand you've been dealt, and you get on with it. And I suppose people who are fortunate enough to be able to do tax planning have probably got more than the average person. So
yeah,
but there are ways.
it was a difficult budget, and in some ways, I do empathise slightly with the position that Labour were in, because the UK government finances are such that they do need to raise money. There's a bit of a deficit problem. There's a sort of hangover from COVID and the sort of additional spending that happened there. So they had to raise money somewhere. But I mean, is there ever a place to raise money that isn't going to put make someone better off and frustrate a lot of people? And there generally isn't. So yeah, it was a difficult one, but I am sort of sympathetic to the view of, do you go after entrepreneurial type reliefs, considering the sort of positive impact they have in other areas of the economy? Difficult one.
Yeah, I mean, ultimately, that we're talking about growth, and the government's talking about growth. Where does that growth come from? Well, it comes from encouraging people, entrepreneurs, to set up businesses, and grow those businesses, and those businesses will pay people, and those people will pay taxes, and that really is what you want to see. And that's something that I guess in this country, I think we have a reasonably entrepreneurial culture, but I caveat that saying I've only worked in the UK, so I don't necessarily have experience of other nations. But a good friend of mine who works in the US, he went to give a talk to a group of 5 and 6 year olds about entrepreneurialism. In the US, I don't think that happens in this country. It's only not that young, but I think there it really is the psyche. I want to set up a business. I want to run a business, and really, you want to encourage those people, because many of them will fail. Sure, a small number will be some will be able to run a business, which will pay them, and they'll have a perfectly okay life, and some will go on to become very rich. But I think that's the price. That's the price worth paying. And it's not a price to pay, because the point is, if they become rich, they've made plenty of other people wealthy along the way. And you do want to encourage entrepreneurs and new businesses, because small and medium-sized businesses are the lifeblood of our economy. The big companies get all the headlines, but if we all just worked for multinationals, whilst we might live quite comfortably, that they don't tend to have that entrepreneurial streak that you see in smaller businesses.
They don't drive necessarily the super rapid growth that you sometimes need.
Absolutely, and they don't. You actually want people. You want some smart people who may be working for a bigger company who go, do you know what? I think I can do this better. I think I can do this better. I can do it cheaper, and so I'm gonna take that risk and branch out on my own. And you know what? I might be successful. I might not be, but actually, the reward can be when I come to sell that. If I come to sell that business, I may pay some tax, but I pay a bit less tax, because people who've built up their businesses, that's all they've done. They have made so many sacrifices that people don't necessarily see. And I guess the reward is that one day they may be able to sell that business for a decent amount of money, and well, if they want to go and retire, they can. But you find with a lot of entrepreneurs, they get itchy feet and want to go and create another company, or perhaps they see somebody who's 20 years younger than them, they see something in them. They want to go and maybe be an angel investor and help seed them and give their experience. So there is it is important to have that entrepreneurial culture and to help and grow that culture.
Yeah, it's true. But I mean, going back to something you mentioned right at the start of the podcast and talking about cultural change, you mentioned when you graduated, and it was very much the same when I graduated in 2004. The only talk in universities at that time, certainly amongst, the economics and business students, was grad jobs. Everyone wanted a grad scheme. That was the only thing that was ever discussed. I really don't remember anyone talking about starting a business. Entrepreneurialism wasn't really mentioned, which, considering I did a business degree, it's kind of odd, really, if you think about it. Whereas I think culturally now it's far more prevalent. There's a much greater expectation from university age and younger people that setting up a business, being more entrepreneurial, is an avenue that's attractive, bit of prestige around it. And I think that is quite exciting to see how that trend will play out over the next sort of 10, 15, 20 years, because I don't think it was a thing for us when we were leaving university.
No, I certainly never on my radar. I think that the advent of technology has made it
seem more possible.
Not easier, but seem more possible, definitely. Because actually now you can potentially set up a business with a phone and a laptop. Whereas I think before we probably felt we needed a bit of infrastructure. And you may set up a business straight from uni, but actually it's not necessarily a bad thing to have gone into industry, have 5 or 10 years experience in that industry, and then you've got more experience. There's no right or wrong way, of course, but you see plenty of people who've been all fields, but you see plenty who've been investment bankers who then take the leap and go and set up a business. Ocado is perhaps a good known example from that. They were both Goldman Sachs employees who felt like.
I think Jeff Bezos was as well, wasn't he? Wasn't he in banking prior to setting up Amazon or something similar?
I don't know, but I vouch your knowledge.
Dangerous. Oh, cool. Look, it's been really interesting. I think the fund management side of what you guys do is really interesting, but the AIM market and the inheritance tax side of your services, I think, will be increasingly interesting and increasingly in demand when this pensions thing plays out. Talking from a financial advisor point of view, there are so many advisors that their go-to, their primary tools when clients, maybe not in the ultra high net worth space, but sort of more mass affluent clients, express concern around inheritance tax, was to utilize gifting and or pensions. And that tool of, the big pensions tool is going to be, in the next couple of years, removed from the toolkit. So I think having or knowing someone or knowing a firm that provides AIM services will be really interesting for a lot of advisors out there. So see what happens April 2027 and onwards.
Good. I look forward to the inflows, Charlie.
Sorry?
I look forward to the inflows, Charlie.
Cool. And just before I let you go, I just wanted to say thanks again to you and RC Brown for supporting Private Client Network. I know you've sort of sponsored some of our events in the early days and always sort of good for attending and stuff, and appreciate it. And I very much hope we provide a bit of value on connecting you with sort of similarly minded private client professionals.
No, thank you. I'm long overdue another visit.
Well, there's some wine tastings and some breakfast coming up.
Well, yeah, well done to you and Simon for setting up. It's been very successful. So well done.
No problem at all. Thanks, appreciate it. But no, thanks again. Appreciate you coming on, and look forward to catching up soon.
Thank you very much.